Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Welcome, everyone. If you enjoy the show, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platform and YouTube. You can now also check out the full video episode on X. Please also consider sharing your favorite episodes and leaving a review. If you do that and tag me or send me a screenshot, I will enter you in a monthly raffle for a free 30-minute consultation with me. For full episode details, including notes, timestamps, transcripts, and the show Patreon page, and other ways to support the show, please head over to my website at zachbitter.com. There you can find all my coaching services, including some new offerings for 2025. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter, where I have been publishing my training journal weekly, as well as other topic-based posts. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website or at hpopodcast@gmail.com. A big thanks to Element, Delta G Ketones, Currents for supporting the podcast. A full description of how I use these products can be found at the end of the episode. Discounts, promotions, and details can also be found in the show notes and at the end of the episode. Some links and promos for listeners from these brands include a free sample pack of the key flavors of Element by heading to drinklmnt.com/HPO, 20% off your next order of Delta G Ketones at deltagketones.com with promo code BITTER20. CurrentsUSA.com, that's CURRANZUSA.com. Use promo code BITTER20DEAL for 20% off your first purchase. You're like a sneakerhead outside of just your job, right?
Everywhere. Yeah, I've got the collection. I actually put most of that in my basement in Boston. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, you're exploring dad life these days, so that's got to be a pretty big shift in the lifestyle, I would imagine, being a father and kind of trying to keep everything else going that was there prior.
It's so funny. I was I was talking to a friend of mine just a little bit ago. I'm like, yeah, I can still get in good runs, but there's just like not the same sleep, not the same recovery, and in theory it's balancing those things out. And then the cascade of being over 40 and then being like, okay, wait, so how do I plan what training, but then what recovery, and then like set realistic goals. And maybe we can go into that a little bit as well. Cause I should probably hire you for your services at some point, but maybe we sneak in some free advice here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Why not? We can do a little troubleshooting. It's funny. I run with a group here in Austin a few days a week. And one of the guys that run with Matt, he just had a daughter a few weeks ago. So we always ask him about, hey, how's the sleep going so far, Matt?
Yeah. Well, and actually it was funny watching States because I think my daughter is like maybe born the same day as Caleb Olson's.
Okay.
And really interesting hearing him talk about it being like, yeah, man, she was just in charge of the sleep, and like my Christine is doing the same thing. But it's a different thing. I mean, yeah, I will say I really, really like it though. But yeah, Ella's amazing. So
have you found like your motivations have shifted at all, like with training or anything like that? Is there just anything? I don't know, I always find when I just reflect back on like any training cycle I've done, it's fun to kind of think like, where was my like motivation from that time, or what was drawing my attention or kind of getting me a little bit of extra juice that maybe was unique about that one versus other ones and things like that.
yeah, can I also ask, like, have we already started recording, or we're already going?
Oh
Or
yeah,
are we doing
yeah.
offline stuff?
We want to cover your life too. We don't want to just talk specs.
No, fair enough. All right, so we're kicking it off. Go for it. What were you saying? Say it again.
Yeah, I was just curious if like when you're going through your training and stuff like that, if you have any like new motivations and things now that you're a dad, and has that kind of changed just like your perspective out there when you're kind of putting in the hard miles?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I I moved to Europe about a year ago, and being on the older side of 40 now, like goal setting is, I don't know, somehow somewhere between like no point and I don't know. There's so much to do. Like the world's so big, and I've been lucky to live in a lot of places, East Coast, West Coast, in the middle, was in Utah even for a little bit. And one of the main motivations for myself and my partner is German, Christina, but was to actually be able to come here and be able to do I've already done this year Chianti in Italy and Istria and Croatia, and to go and see a lot of places. And I think even going back to the time we met, which was 10 maybe 12 years ago, probably around 2015,
Hmm.
like I was living in Utah and working for a running brand, and you could get to any race and go anywhere, and you do so many races and events just because it's fun. And then coming here, okay, it's not like Puma sponsors so much stuff, but I also was just like, I just want to be here and like see a different part of the world. Like I'm not a mountain runner. But like the motivation is purely, I think, for me just to get and see new things. And I've certainly done some things that are not in my wheelhouse. I did like a marathon. It was, I don't know, almost 50K in Austria. I think I walked like the whole thing for 9 hours. Like it was walk 5,000 feet up, go down on a trail that's not really a trail. And I'm like, I'm not jumping from rock to rock. Like this isn't working for me. So I was kind of walking down, and then, okay, now we're going to go up a different mountain. And it was a little bit different, but those are the things. It's like, okay, now I can also come and say I checked Austria off my list and kind of go on
Yeah.
to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah, you get into those mountain courses and it's a skill set. It doesn't it Yeah, I usually follow the framework of like fitness is the big moving variable there, but yeah, some of those courses you could make an argument for skill set to some degree. Just, if you can't run down the technical descents and someone else can, then it's like they close gaps and create gaps quite quickly. So,
It's true. And also, I mean, you talk about gaps, that implies you're racing, like just trying to
right,
sim-
yeah.
one of the things that I keep saying to myself is just purely the downhill running. And I've been saying it for actually maybe from Austria is when I learned it, and now I've been trying to do it. But yesterday I did just 2 by 2 mile downhill on a treadmill, and you can
Hmm.
get like 30 to 60 seconds a mile faster than you would otherwise. But I think there's just no replacement for that pounding. And I'm from Michigan. It's flat. I've lived a lot of flat places. Done, not saying you've done only flat stuff, but like I've mostly stayed more towards flat races. And every time Christina's like, yeah, the people that do those races, like they live in the mountains, they're running up and down. Like a lunch run is 1,500 feet and down for them. And
Yeah.
it's trying to simulate that pounding is just so hard. And I think I'll be able to do it and adapt a little bit more towards it. But yeah, that's like a huge variable, like you said.
Yeah. Well, in the short term, you don't have to worry about that so much because the fall 50 in Door County is a lot more runnable.
I forgot that I texted you about that plan. Can I give you a little bit of back history? So
Yeah.
I tried to run it's called the Mauer Weg, which means basically Berlin Wall. So the Berlin Wall itself is about 95 miles, 155 kilometers. So they actually have a really cool 100 miler there. That's like pretty flat, pretty fast. Obviously, it should be at least. And I went, and my daughter's like 3 months old, and I should tell you a little bit more too. Like I've been trying Morton's. I've tried the bicarb a little
Hmm.
bit, and it absolutely wrecks me. Now, I'd also been in the US for 3 weeks and was super jet lagged and whatever. But I basically got to about mile 8 of this 100 and my stomach was gone. And
Mm.
it was like, okay, it's too early to quit. It's too early to quit. So I made it another, I don't know, I think I made it to just shy of mile 35, but like just never got the stomach on. So then that puts you in a really weird place. And also, my in law parents were there, and Christina and the 3 month old. And I was just like, I'd rather go grab a pizza in Berlin than be walking or yeah, mostly walking with some sparse jogging for the next 28 hours or whatever, 20 hours more until whatever the cutoff was. So we went and got that pizza, but then that puts you in a weird mental place where you've kind of trained. I had a pretty solid 3 month block. You get a little taper, you feel a little sick, you don't have your great race day. And I was actually just listening to you talking to Alyssa Clark too, and
Mm.
it's so true. And one of the things you guys said was, hey, a lot of these people are aiming at 3 key races a year. I forget if you were talking about Katie Scheid or whoever it was, and it's like, yeah, but you can put a lot in, but then if those things don't go well, then what do you do? And that's a little bit where I am right now. Like I was running the next day, like I'm not sore, I'm not burnt out. It's just a little bit of new dad life. Like how much time do you want to spend, and where is that motivation?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you've definitely got a lot going on. I know like a lot of times when I'm talking with coaching clients, one of the first things we'll usually do is just like just look at like what is a reasonable target from a volume standpoint to even dedicate towards whatever you're training for, because if you start trying to impede upon non-negotiables, then there's a consistency pattern that usually doesn't kind of match up well. So it's better to kind of maybe find whatever training strategy is going to work within the parameters that you can tolerate with everything else that's going on in life. But it sounds like you have been getting in decent training. It's just navigating the race day and everything that kind of goes into that is maybe the big variable for fall 50.
I mean, running in life, it's a journey, right? And you go through all these things. When I was in high school, I had a pretty bad injury and broke my kneecap, and then had to come back. And when I was with living in Utah, I had a pretty monster ankle surgery and ended up having one turn into four of them. And then there's like some of that weakness, some of that stability, coupled with that 2018 was right when everybody started running in carbon plates more. And then you
Hmm.
just end up with Achilles soreness for years, and you're like, wait, what do we do? And I finally kind of figured out the stretches and the things to get beyond that. But it's a journey, and I think it's hard for me at my age to slowly adjust those variables down and think, tempo pace forever was whatever 6:08, right? And I could just go do that any day, and to be like, wait, is it a mile slower? Wait, if I run faster than 7 minute pace, my leg feels like it's gonna fall off. Like, what adjustments do we make to the training, to the goals, to kind of all of that stuff? So
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, but fall 50 will be fun. I just love that course. That time of year out in that spot is gonna just it never disappoints. So I'm excited for you to be. You've done that race before though, right? You've been out
I've
there.
done it. I've done it twice. Yeah, the family history is we always go to North or South Dakota pheasant hunting like that
Hmm.
week, and so a couple times I've been like, oh, I'll just go hop in this race and have a good one. And my first 50 miler ever, Land Between the Lakes, I ran like 7:06, and it was
Hmm.
pretty quick. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll go under seven easily soon. And I've just never gotten faster. And I've run like 7 hours around many times. So one time I ran fall 50, but I went through halfway at like dead on 3:30. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to negative split. What do I do? And that was one of the few drops that I've had. Then the other time I ran pretty good. I forget if it was 7:25 or 7:35. It was in the middle. But that's the conundrum again. And maybe I'll ask your advice on that one of like, if you're not sure about a goal, an A goal, if you can really hit it and do it, like in theory, if it was a marathon, you'd say, well, go out a little bit slower and you can pick it up. But 50 milers are a little bit different. I think it's a challenge for a lot of people to run a negative split. But yeah, short of saying, well, hey, be realistic about your fitness, and if your fitness is only X, then try to run X. But if you have like a super A goal,
Hmm.
what would you typically recommend to people on that?
Yeah, I would say like my belief around pacing with ultra marathons is like it probably should be like reasonably close to even. Um, Maybe not like I don't think there's necessarily like, let's say, a 2% negative split's gonna be better than a 2% positive split, but I think once we start getting up into kinda like what we normally see in ultra marathons, where I wanna say, like, average is around 10% positive split, so most people are in good company with a little bit of a harder finish than a harder start or, like, a conservative start, fast finish
Yeah,
type of scenario,
yeah,
and I think some of that might just be pacing strategies, and just the extrap it's tough to predict how what is a goal time for something of 50 miles or further. So to
yeah,
some degree, I think maybe it gets a little bit harder to do that in general. But what I think is it's a little easier if you have a goal time. So like if you did have a goal time of say like I want to finish just under 7 hours, the first thing I would do is I kind of reverse engineer that and say, okay, what pacing, especially for a course like Fall 50, where there's some variance there. There's some climbs in there, some downhills in there, but generally it's going to smooth out fairly evenly over the course of that one versus, some of these mountain races where, yeah, you could be pushing way harder on the first half and the second half. And if that profile is varied by a lot, then it's kind of hard to tease the data out as to whether you're actually going positive or negative. But Fall 50, you can get a little closer. So then I would look at it like, all right, what pace is that? And then just kind of exploring where that lands in training in terms of where it falls on the intensity, like the aerobic intensity spectrum. So, like when
yeah,
someone starts getting too far beyond like their aerobic threshold, it's just getting more and more risky because that's going to be a pretty difficult intensity to tolerate for 7 hours in a lot of cases.
yeah,
But if you can get that pace, the I really like aerobic threshold as sort of a benchmark for ultra marathons, especially the
Mhm.
longer they get, because it kind of is this like this line where, yeah, you can probably cross it a bit, but you don't want to be consistently above it in a lot of cases, or then you probably are setting yourself up for the reality of I'm going to be going quite a bit slower at the end, and then you have to ask the question if the trade-off is worth it. Um, there's different theories out there. I think when you start getting up maybe above like 5% positive, you're probably leaving something on the table versus an alternative pacing strategy.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, and then to some degree, you can kind of use that framework, I guess, to kind of see like where things are at from what your pace is at like that or what your intensity is at, whether you're using heart rate or going in and getting a lab test done and kind of figuring out where that lands on the aerobic intensity spectrum, and start trying to work it down if you need some work to get it to be realistic, or at least know like where it lands on the conservative to moderate to aggressive scale. And then people have different tolerances if they want to try to go for the aggressive goal, or they want to be a little more conservative and be make it maybe a little more predictable, or somewhere in between.
Yeah. I also think sometimes I think a lot about the difference between, let's say, like an elite like yourself and a non elite that's maybe aspirational to be good. And I've been okay. I've won some things. I think that there's also just a big difference between, let's say, if you're running like 50 miles a week versus 100, because I
Mhm.
think some of that drop off is just going to be completely different. And, in high school, like running the mile, my first lap was like always 60. And I
Yeah.
wasn't running a 4 minute mile. It was just like, no, 61, 62. And you just go out and then you chill and run like 69, 69, and then in that half a kick. And even my first 50 miler, and not that yeah, I don't know, that's stuck in my head for a while. It's been a goal of like, because there I ran my first 10 miles at like sevens, and the second 10 were at eights, and then running 10:30s by the end. I remember around mile 35 or 40 falling like two or three times in the woods, right? And you're just like, I don't have any legs left. But there's something weird to me about ultras where it's like, oh, this is so long, I should go slow, I should go slow, where you almost slow down so much and then you get tired running slow. Maybe hopefully less than you would running fast, but it's
Mhm.
it's it's such a mental game, and there's probably more specific training that would get me there. And I think the estimate is a tough thing. One of the things that I would maybe love your perspective on. Oh, and when you say thresholds as well, are you talking more paces? Are you looking at heart rates? Or you would probably say those should correlate? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, I think like I like to look at, well, so when it comes down to race goal time, we kind of have to deviate towards pacing because that's what's going to be required to hit the target. So then it becomes like, well, where does that land on the intensity scale? And there you can kind of use heart rate, at least directionally, to try to figure out, especially if someone has like a really good understanding of where their zones are, and it's been kind of thoroughly tested. So say between like 130 and 140 beats per minute, they're pretty reliably know where they are within that. I think heart rate can be a decent kind of proxy for some of that stuff, but at the end of the day, like perceived effort is probably going to be a better gauge in a lot of cases for someone who's got as much running experience as you do.
Yeah.
Um, so the hard part, I think, with ultras, especially as you get into the longer stuff, is like perceived effort is gonna still be there on race day, but it is also gonna be something where easy is gonna feel easy, but even easier than what normally would be easy might be the target. So then I think like some pace parameters can be really useful. And if you can tease out where those paces land at those perceived efforts on kind of similar course terrain,
Yeah.
then you might have a little bit of a better idea of like what to be looking for on your watch when you're out there. Um, Not to pivot too much, but I do think there's like now this depends on the goal time as well, because like if you're running fast enough, there's just less room for something like this. But I think a lot of ultra runners also neglect like the structured walking breaks. They walk when they need to because their body says, "Hey, you better walk here,"
Yep.
versus like in the early stages, thinking of it more like an interval session where, we're gonna kind of take a break from this mechanical loading that the running is going to produce versus walking, and I think that probably adds up over the course of a long race too. If you have a little bit more of a balance between your walking breaks in the first half as you do in the second half.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that brings up two things for me though. One is like I went back and looked at I mean my 100 mile P right now is 1909.
Hmm.
down at Brazos Bend. And it was interesting. I went back and looked at that data and say, okay, what could I glean, right, from running, I don't know, 930s and then 10s and whatever. Um, I was at 181 heart rate,
Were you?
so freaking much of that, Zach. I am not kidding you. And I hear you about like the math and the negative splits and like zone two and heart rate and all of these things. Part of me just wonders if I grew up in a time when running was just freaking hard and it was just all out and you just run all out. And then when you start to have a little bit of a low spot, like you figure it out and then you just go harder again. And
Yeah.
I think it's hard when you're not, let's say, trained. Like to me, ideal training for a 100 miler would be like, I don't know, 140 a week, or for a 50 miler, it would be like 70, 80. Like there is
Hmm.
that threshold. And not being a pro, I'm a little bit short of that. So you're like somehow rolling the dice. But that
Yeah.
just really throws such a wrench when I'm like trying to look at the things that I've done. And I'm like, wait a minute. It just, and I'm like, is the data bad? You know, a lot of that. But I do need to give you credit for that as well. Cause yeah, I did Brazos. That 19 was pre injury, and then post injury, I did both 23 and 21. And you literally, with that walk strategy, saved me that 2 hours. And it was pretty awesome actually. Even at in Berlin when I dropped, I had a good buddy named Kieran that was still out there slogging and having trouble. And we ran. I told him a little bit about your idea, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, the walk breaks like before you're dead and have to do them." It's a really, I think, tried and true strategy. So you help me, you help somebody else for sure as well.
Very cool. Glad to hear it. Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough with courses like Brazos, so because it's so flat and controlled, then there's just not like this intuitive spot to do any walking or hiking in the early stages, and it can be easy to kind of get out ahead of yourself then find yourself maybe walking a little more on those last couple of loops than you would have liked to because it's just not like getting hit with a nice steep climb where you're like, yeah, I should probably hike this. It's just a little more predictable.
That's true. That's true.
Awesome. So here's a question I have for you. Are you going to wear the Fast R3s for Fall 50?
That was 100%. I am all in on Fast R3 for Fall 50. That was actually my plan for Berlin, was to experiment in the month 6 weeks before to see like how much can I run in, obviously I've got the guy right here. How much can I
Hmm.
run in something with extreme geometry, the long plate, really bouncy? I don't know the answer. And Berlin was also weird. They didn't have like a drop bag aid station until like mile 38. So
Hmm.
that was a lot of commitment to be like, do I want to run 40 miles in this? Like, what if I don't think this is working? And I had it in my drop bag there, and I'd quit before then because I was a walking mess. I wasn't like, oh yeah, let's run and be able to run a little bit faster. But no, 100%. And I think that's that's what I love. And I said it, but I'll say it again. That's what I love about running right now. It used to be like, hey man, what are your tempo paces, your speed work, and your long run? And okay, then if you're doing hilly mountainous stuff, like what's your vert? It used to be very very simple things. Nowadays it's like, are you doing heat adaptation?
Hmm.
Okay, we talked a little bit about bicarb as a way that people are doing more. Um, there's so many different ways, and I think footwear is a huge thing. Like the shoes are super fast. Like I don't know, let's say on average at least 8 beats a minute lower heart rate at the same pace.
Hmm.
And when we talk about efficiency or energy savings, I mean, the math on Fast R3 is about 3.5% more efficient. Um, but people say, oh, that makes you run faster. Well, maybe you can run faster with it. But what it means is you'll be more efficient at kind of a given pace. So, yeah,
Hmm.
that's my plan and my goal. My longest run was probably 17 milers in Fast R, and I think I was okay. But that would definitely be the goal for something like Fall 50. Just be all in, and I respect your advice. I also might just go like forget it and just hammer from the gun with the fast shoe and like figure it out and see if I can, as they say, find some old man magic. I don't know.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder that Element Electrolytes is my go to electrolyte source. They are offering a free sample pack with purchase for all HPO listeners at drinklmnt.com/HPO. They also just launched a new flavor, lemonade. Check it out risk free with their 30-day money back guarantee. Also, check out my full description of how I use Element at the end of the episode. It is interesting with the performance shoes now because, like you said, like the designs and the tech in there are such that like it gets very eye catchy to say like, oh, well, if I'm going to be that much more efficient, or for example, like when you guys sent me the Fast R early on, I think it was just before Boston, before it kind of really blew up with all the marketing y'all did with that. I had been just coming off Achilles tendonitis, so I was running in the first shoe that I could run in pain free was the New Balance 1080, which about as slow of a shoe as you're gonna find on the market. But that's what I had. So I got to a point where like I'd done enough rehab where it was time to start introducing different stuff and start thinking about like, well, what shoe am I gonna try to wear on a future race and start getting that into the rotation enough where I could start, getting used to it. So I would do like a run and then I'd come back and I'd throw a pair on of like a more of a performance shoe and just do like a mile in it just to kind of test to see how's the Achilles going to respond to this. But the other like data point I would get from that would just be like I'd be doing this run at a pretty consistent pace, and then all of a sudden I switch the shoes and start again, so I could get a little bit of a look at like where the variance was.
Yeah,
And when I put on the Fast R, I was like 15, 20 seconds to the mile faster in that shoe than the New Balance
sure,
1080,
sure.
which 1080 is going to be
I
slower
mean, it
than most
might even
control
be
shoes,
worth
but
more than that. You're maybe at 6-8% at that point when you
right,
take
it's up
half
there.
the
Yeah.
weight
Mhm.
and plate and yeah, all the things. Yeah,
Yeah, so well, and that was interesting to me because like I tried enough of the super shoes on the market now where I have a kind of a feel of like where I gravitate towards in terms of what feels the fastest.
yeah.
I still need to go in with Dustin and get tested efficiently, but when he tested the Fast R versus I think it was it the he used the Alpha Fly is like his like that's the one I think he's always tested the best in.
I think so. Yeah,
Um it's always like ZoomX, I think foam is something that he usually tests right around 4% in most of those high models. And then the Fast R was like I think the first shoe that he ever produced a statistically significant increase in efficiency above and beyond that. So at that point I was like, okay, well, that's really interesting to me because that matches my perception as well in terms of kind of what I felt in that shoe.
yep.
So then it was like, okay, this was on the short list. And now the games begin of like how long can I tolerate that for 100 miles with a shoe like that or not? And that's, there's always going to be some guesswork with that because I'm not going to go and run 100 miles before the race itself. I have to, assume some risk in an effort to find optimal performance at the end of the day.
It's true. I think any n equals one is a little bit difficult as well. I mean, I know you said statistically significant. It's like, okay, a big jump for him.
For him,
You know,
yeah.
that's what's tough, right? Is averaging all of those things out. But that's what's crazy for us about Fast R3 for Puma is like every single. Usually, there's variants, right? There's different foams, different geometries, different rockers, different all these things, and people in theory respond differently to some of them. So even with a shoe like Deviate Elite 3, which was a great shoe, we saw on average 0.5% running economy, let's say not improvement, but just like, well, improvement, I guess, or a 0.5% better than everything. But that was on average. And when you're that close and you have a swing of 2 to 3%, some are going to be a lot lower, some are going to be this, blah, blah. And that's where like the averages. And that's what's mind blowing about Fast R3. Everybody has tested faster in it. We've never actually had a lab data point, and I haven't heard ever of anyone having one where they had a more efficient run in a competitor. And I think that actually brings me to like it used to be like, oh, like you should do your speed days or long runs maybe, and like you're super sure what to do. And I would love to hear your thoughts from an ultra perspective because for me, I feel like I would like to even maybe spend more time in it. And I'm like, well, wait, if you're going to
Mhm.
go actually really do 100 miles in the shoe, shouldn't you just say this is the only shoe I'm running in this week? Shouldn't you? Because the other reason it's like the plates are in fast arts extended. It's all this great, not crazy geometry, but let's say it unique, right? Where your muscles and tendons are somehow working differently. I'm like, wouldn't you want a ton of experience when it comes to an ultra so that you're not pushing some of those forces around and overworking a certain muscle or tendon or calf or whatever it is? I don't know.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my current theory right now is that like if you zoom out long enough, it can be something where in the early stages maybe you use it briefly, and then as you get further and further in the training, you start phasing it more and more.
Yeah.
And that just matches well with my training approach too, because like early in my training, I'm usually doing more like short and long interval type work, and my long run is more traditional in its structure.
Yeah.
So in that phase, I might use it for say like some of the short intervals early on, and then once I start getting maybe a little bit near the end of the interval side of the training, and the long runs getting at least decently built out at a once per week frequency, then maybe I start adding it to the long run too. So I add another exposure point. And then I
Yeah.
enter a phase where I'm going to be doing like, I'm going to be focusing the majority of my training load on things that are like pretty close proximity to race intensity. And I'm pulling back quite a bit on speed work. And I'm trying to, I guess the way to maybe think about it is I'm shifting like the interval stuff and the speed work towards maintenance versus adaptation generating in terms of the programming, so then I can cut back on quite a bit of it and then free up some of that training load for like back-to-back long runs on the weekend or just more volume that's distributed out over the course of the week. And
Yeah.
at that phase, I think that's where you might be thinking, that's where I think I would say, like, at that point, you probably want to be getting in that shoe you're going to race in a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't have to be every run during the week, but, for someone like myself where I might peak up to 150 miles in some cases, like, I probably would want a good 100 miles on that shoe in one of those weeks just to really, like you described, kind of get really comfortable in it. And even to some degree, stress test it. Because if you can't get through a training week in the shoe, are you going to be able to get through 100 miles
But
straight with it?
that's
It's like,
but that's exactly my point. And it used to be like I generally am a person that's I a naturalist or however you want to say it, right? Like I believe in our bodies working. I believe in like feet having flexibility and toes having space, and I believe in a lot of those things. But I think if you just do all that and then you try to put on a super shoe with a really weird or unique geometry, and I mean, you can talk about Puma, but Mizuno has a unique geometry. There's a lot of these
yeah,
shoes that are just, it's like, wait, what? That's a shoe? Like how? And I'm like, okay, I get it. And it's a tool, but I'm like, all those little stabilizers and all those little things. And part of it for me is having had the Achilles surgery and Haglund's deformity and taken off and a lot of those things. Anytime you put a cast on something, you're going to atrophy basically everything that doesn't move for however many weeks or months, right? And
hmm
so when you have that weakness, trying to build it back up, I mean, I think that's one of the sad things for me when I look at my, let's call it running career. I think that every time I've had a major injury and a major setback, I don't think I've ever really gotten back to the full level. And I mean, going back to my sophomore year of high school, where as a freshman, I went from 509 to like 442, right? And had whatever it was, 8 races in a row in a mile where you're PRing and you're like, wow. And, I had a state champ that was on my team and like really, really good stuff. And then you break something like a kneecap and you're trying to come back. And, I don't know how good of PTs and stuff we had, but
right, yeah,
I think that's a challenge. And I think certainly some people now are more focused on like some things, and if they're just running, okay, I don't know if Jakob Ingebrigtsen or whoever has ever had like a basketball injury, right?
right,
Like
yeah, yeah.
staying pretty focused in the one main sport. But I think that these shoes are tools. The super shoes are tools, and I think that you have to adapt to them. And I would love to do it and get adapted, and then go, yeah, I did this and it worked. But I think all these things that are new, you have to kind of figure out like, does this work for me? How does it work? And I'm in the middle of that process right now.
hmm Well, and I mean, there is that whole the whole conversation around like what is the specifics of what you're doing too, because like for me, if things go well at 100 mile between the two races I've got scheduled this fall, like at least one of them hopefully is like well into the 6 minute range and continuously there too. So like that level of consistency and kind of more running focused is just going to be different than say like if I did 100 mile or somewhere, or maybe not. I guess I'm gonna use myself as a comparator. If I did a longer, like multi-day thing or something where there's gonna be walking breaks, there's gonna be slower pacing, there's gonna be like mechanical differences, then it's like, I think at that point you start having to ask the question about like you said, like which is the tool that you really need to actually perform at your best here, and you get into
Yeah.
the world of performance versus stability and comfort and all that stuff at that point.
It's true. Yeah, and I still remember, I mean, Ian Charman when he ran fast at Rocky Raccoon saying, "Yeah, I was just training for a marathon and
hmm
I went and did a fast ultra." And that's always stuck with me, but I don't think I've also really done it in the last almost 15 years now that I've been doing ultras. I'm like, ultras are a long way. Let's do ultra training. And I keep saying, oh, I should train for a fast marathon or I should go that other direction. But, and you would say, when you're training for your ultras, how close are you to like peak marathon shape? I mean, probably not, right? Probably you're more really, really focused at the ultra that you're aiming at, right?
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference would be like about midway through the plan. If I were to say, all right, I'm going to go for a marathon instead of choosing to go for 100 mile, my focus would become I need to get as fast and as durable as I can at lactate threshold.
Mm,
Whereas with 100 mile, I'm kind of running that same mindset, but with aerobic threshold. I want to see my pace get as low as I can get it at aerobic threshold,
yep.
which just changes the inputs to some degree. Where the marathon, I'm doing a lot more marathon pace work, a lot more long intervals and things like that
Yep.
during that last sharpening phase, and kind of building out a single long run per week. Whereas with the 100 mile stuff, I'm doing less of the interval stuff, more of like the zone 2, zone 3 stuff, and sometimes like maybe like reserving upwards to 50, 60 miles of my training week in 2 days on back-to-back sessions. So
Yeah.
um it kind of, yeah, they compete with each other to some degree once you start kind of like choosing that path. But I would say a good half, or if not a little bit more, of the training would probably feed into a pretty productive marathon if I would decide to like spend that last 8 to 10 weeks going that direction instead.
Yeah.
um it's interesting enough. I've built kind of a career around running fast, runnable 100 miles, so that's got it. That sort of takes up a lot of the time and energy. But I have always thought like maybe one of these seasons I should just say like screw it. I'm just going to try to see if I can run a fast marathon and see where that lands me. Because I've really never actually even done what I would consider a well structured marathon training plan and raced. I've raced quite a few marathons, but they've been like, oh, I'm 5 weeks out from this goal 100 mile. I'm going to be
Yeah.
at this marathon. I'll do it as like kind of a high quality long run structure. And then, that's usually landed me in like the low 230s.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think with some specificity, I could, take a shot at something kind of in the low 220s or maybe go under that.
Do you
Yeah. And
think,
now we have the shoes. So
do you still think you're close enough to your peak where you could maximize it? Or do you think when you were younger that you would have had a few extra minutes on there as well, like faster?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, because I'm 39, so you're not going to argue that I'm at like probably optimal marathon age. Maybe at best you could argue I'd be near the end of it. Um, so if you would have asked me this like 3 months ago, I would have said, yeah, those days, like I would be reaching for whatever the new normal is in terms of my capabilities versus what is actually what I would have been able to maybe do in like my late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
But this training block has gone so well that I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case. I'm hitting paces for durations that I've rarely seen before. So that tells me like maybe there is a little bit more still left for something like that if I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but then I have to decide whether I want to spend that energy towards a marathon versus trying to run a fast 100 miler. So
I mean, it's the same question. Comes back to what motivates you, right? Like what
yep,
makes you
yep.
wanna go and do something, and that's where I'm a little bit afraid of this fall 50. I'm not calling it a trap, but like I had a good build. I had a race day. It didn't go well. Would love to shut it down, and I have enough tickets and stones and qualifiers and all that crap. I really hope I'm getting into UTMB or Western States next year.
Mhm.
I'm really really hopeful for December, and I was like, wait, but it's 2 more months until October, and then I would have 2 months to chill, and then hopefully get into something. But yeah, it's like what you guys were saying. I mean, you sometimes you get one shot in a lifetime, at
Mhm.
some of those things, and so for me, if it's UTMB this year, next year, that would be amazing. Western States is still for me a big dream race. Actually, I wanted to ask you that when you ran states, like I always wonder when it comes to fast people like you, I'm like, why not just go to the front? Why not just own that and just go for it? I mean, I think you ran what 18 hours or something. You ran a pretty good time there, but I always wonder that.
Yeah, I did. Mistakes was actually my first 100 miler. I was 16:53, I think, or 50,
Okay,
52 or 53 the first time. And then
okay.
the second
That
time it
was your
was
first
a
100?
little, yeah, yeah. I got into the Ice Age 50 mile. It was one of I think it was the Montreal Ultra Cup at that point, which is basically
Okay.
the same thing as what the Golden Ticket Series is now. And my goal was just to, compete at the Ice Age 50. I had no interest in the actual Western States spot, but I won and then was told I'd be an idiot if I didn't take that spot. So I was like, well, you
Yeah.
know, don't want to be an idiot. So I guess we're doing this.
So you ran for, I mean, 16 hours. That's moving. That's pretty good in the heat and hills and all that there. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of learning that went on that day for sure, and it was the first mountain race I had done either too. And you get to the mountain is a pretty loose term, I guess, and someone like Killian would probably describe Western states as like the entry to mountains at best, whereas someone like myself coming from the Midwest, it was like very much mountain.
yeah. Well, there is a mountain. Like you start the
There,
race
yeah, yeah,
and basically straight up a mountain, but that's part of the allure of that, right? You've got kind of three
hmm
different atmospheres and three different stages there.
yeah.
So
So, yeah, yeah, but it just goes to kind of show you just the variety within the sport too, is just like kind of what we were talking about before with like specific courses and then temperatures and things too. And people are just going to have different strengths and weaknesses. And then,
yep,
training inputs to a degree can impact how you do out there. And now
yep,
too, just with the evolution of the sport and what we know works and then access to the resources for it. Like if you follow the live stream on Western in the last couple of years, it's like just almost Formula One level support at the aid stations versus what you see in like um in like the documentaries from like 2010 and things like that, where guys are just like a couple of handhelds, maybe a nice bandana, and
yeah, yeah. Well, so and this is brings me to maybe the number one question that I wanted to ask you. And I mean, I know we were with the same brand for a long time. You were there a real long time, and now you're free agent, and now there's this whole world of shoes and craziness and advancement, and that's I'm never gonna go break 240 for the marathon, and I look at my time and I'm like, oh, with the shoes, how much could I subtract off? But this is my real question to you, like how much do you feel like the shoes are making a difference? Have you found a favorite, or do you have? I would love to hear your top two or three favorite shoes that maybe also
yeah,
work with you because we've run together. I've seen you run. You have definitely a different stride. I don't know if you describe yourself as a supinator, but to me, you're
yeah.
way, way much further on the outside of your foot than nearly anyone that I've ever seen, and I would be like, oh, I don't know how efficient that is, and then I see you run 100 miles all at 6:43 or whatever the heck it was, and I go, okay, it's efficient, Zach. You've proven it. So I'd love to hear kind of your assessment on the race day and super shoe industry, and yeah, how the shoes are working for you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say, like, from my experience so far, like a short list of what I think I would be looking at for something like a fast, runnable, paved or tracked 100 mile would be Puma Fast R. Asics Metaspeed is probably
Don't
one
you
that
have
would
to
be up
say?
there.
Sorry, don't you have to say ad paid for before you
Oh,
say
yeah.
my super? No, I'm just kidding.
Sponsored by, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I'm
Now,
like,
if I
give me
could get
the
all these brands that I'm about to mention to sponsor me at the same time, now I'm winning.
that's the move. Well, you've got the podcast, but so no,
There's a whole
sorry for the
exclusivity thing that gets
interruption.
in the way there.
It was
No,
just
that's
too
that's good.
funny.
The other one I'm really interested in with respect to Ultramarathon is like the Adidas Light Strike Pro stuff. Like I think like there's that shoe just feels like they maybe have threaded the needle a bit with stability and performance, which when you get to these longer races comes like if I'm doing a marathon tomorrow, I'm wearing the Fast R for sure. Um, if it's 100 miles, I think that kind of brings a couple other options onto the table where I could make the argument where like maybe I test a percentage better with the Fast R, but it's possible that given the rigors of a 100 mile and how I'm going to feel at 70, 80 miles might change kind of the dynamics of how that would and I'm feeling at that point in time. Um, to me, some of that though is just to say like if there's a shoe that I perform the most efficient in, it almost becomes my responsibility from there to try to find a way to get access to that efficiency. So if that means like what we were talking about before, doing more work in it so that I build up the tolerance to be able to sustain that for 100 miles, then that's the path forward. And then it's just finding out what the timeline required to do that is. And I mean, it's sort of a mindset I've had with footwear from the beginning. Like when I was early on in ultra running, this is prior to super foams and all this premium footwear stuff. It was like, well, if I'm looking for efficiency, like I probably want as little cushion in that shoe as possible and be low profile racing flat style.
Yeah,
The pinch point there for ultra marathons is that's a long way to run in a shoe like that. And if your foot breaks down and fatigue sets in and
Yeah.
it's game over. It doesn't matter if the shoe's faster or not. So my mindset with that was like, well, make it sustainable.
Yeah.
So I did the work to make it sustainable, and I've done 100 milers in like sub 4 ounce shoes and things like that. And that was great for that time, but now that's not as efficient as the super shoes are. So now you got this interesting dynamic of you can stack up and get that kind of preservation of the lower leg as well as the improved performance. So now it's like, okay, that was fine for that time period, but if I'm looking at it through the lens of performance, now I have to get myself tolerant to the faster stuff on the market that, the sport's more or less adopted at this point.
No, it's true. It's true.
Just a quick reminder that Delta G ketones is my go-to exogenous ketone source. You can get 20% off at deltagketones.com when you use promo code BITTER20. Check out my full description of how I use Delta G ketones at the end of the episode.
Yeah, and I remember a long time ago in Runner's World reading, they were like, what's healthier, like trails or road running? Because trail people say soft surfaces are healthier, and road people say, well, you get hurt in the mountains or whatever they would say.
Yeah.
And the conclusion of the article actually basically said both sides are right. Like when you get attuned for a certain surface, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of landing, in terms of all those things, that it actually does become somehow better for you. And I think that's one of the things. Like also, my real old PRs were in like nothing, right? Like Jasari's on the track and all this
Yeah.
thin, like nothing there shoes. And I think when you come to super thick, bouncy, crazy foams, I mean, many people have adapted well, but also many people we would call super responders, right? Where they
Mm-hmm.
over get so much more. And that was, going back to the first super shoe, some people were getting 1% and some people were getting 9%. And there's so many variables. And I also, yeah, I mean, there's certain things that I think we could scientifically say, like, because the foams are soft, light, and bouncy, you should in some way almost try to like if you have a longer stride or you try to overstride, it's going to help you a little bit more because, sorry, you can expand your stride length more than you can your cadence, right? Cadence has a little bit of a natural limiter.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can jump out more, but then land and have a really efficient spring and good cushioning underneath, I mean, that's one of the ways to do it. So, no, I couldn't agree more with you at a high level to that. I will say, though, too, like myself and the team at Puma, that's one of the things that we're doing when it comes to the shoes is like, okay, Fast R3, fastest shoe in the history of the world, in my opinion, and in some researchers. Then the next question is, so is there a way for us to take that same key elements of the shoe, that same geometry or that same whatever makes it so good, materials, of course, and to actually have that be a stable version, right? And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on the assessment, and I thank you for the comment, and that's also something that inspires, I think, me and us to say, okay, so we're good in this, and there's opportunity for improvement on that other side, and how do you work towards that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, event specific stuff dictates a lot of that too. And then the market demand from that too, where it's like, as a brand, I can appreciate that they're not going to likely sit down and be like, hey, let's see if we can build the very fastest controlled 100-mile shoe. Maybe that day will come. Actually,
Yeah.
a little bit of a pivot. I was going to ask you, um, did you follow any of the Adidas
Oh yeah.
100-mile, yeah, or I'm sorry, 100-kilometer project
Yep.
that they just did? It seems like
Yep.
they seem at least mild, like as far as big brands go, reasonably interested in flatter controlled races, at least with that marketing push. So who knows? Maybe they're looking at the running growth and they're saying like, okay, there's like this deep history with these timed events, these flat runnable stuff. It's
Yeah.
going to grow along the way. At some point, we want to be in on the front of it, or we can drive that to some degree with marketing.
Yeah.
Um, but that shoe specifically, I mean, it was kind of weird in my opinion. Is just like I get the the marketing drive with something like that, but I can't figure out why you would make the shoe illegal. Unless you're thinking of like there's a bigger market to sell this to people, or at least like some version of this, because it likely won't like be that exact shoe. It can't be actually because they customized it to some of the athletes' feet.
And they
But
put it in a tube beforehand. They did a lot of special things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like I think it was like 60 millimeter stack height, so like what like
Yeah.
50% above world athletics regulations. And yeah, so like I would have I don't have a problem with exhibition stuff like that. Like I didn't necessarily have a problem with the Kipchoge sub 2 stuff, but I wish they would do it in a way where it was like, okay, where there's enough control here so that it actually feels comparable. Where like I look at Sorokin in that event, he ran I think 6:04. He's ran 6:05 twice in the past. I put both those 6:05s as much better performances than his 6:04
Sure.
because that shoe he
Pacing
had
and
on.
crafting, sure.
Right. And to some degree he's 43 now too, so it's like there's maybe he still has his at these longer distances has all the ability he's ever had, but you know
Yeah.
it's getting down to time for him to some degree as well, so it's like who knows. I'd have to ask him about how he felt about the race versus some of those two 6:05s he ran. But yeah, I mean it's like it like I don't get why you wouldn't try. I guess maybe if you're looking at it through the lens of we need one of these guys to break 6 hours to make the marketing work, and the only way for us to do that when they looked at the data was to put them in a 60 millimeter stack height shoe, then they're like, okay, well that drives the decision making. But to me, it'd be way more compelling if that shoe was World Athletics compliant. They're on a loop. It's measured, certified, and sure, it's not going to count as a world record, but like anyone watching that would be like, oh, that was like a reasonable amount of control we'd like to see to test human limitation, but not too much mechanical input to the degree where now we're like an apples and orange comparison to like his prior best time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, we're talking about that brand and that event because they did something, right? And there were
Right.
many elements from the shoe to, okay, the apparel to the cooling to the,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
in parts of it. And so, I mean, it was a marketing event, right? It wasn't a legal race. I don't know if it will it actually count. Actually, I
No.
don't know the
Mm-mm.
answer. Yeah, so they're following. I mean, other brands have done a few of those things. I and part of for me moving to Germany, I'm sitting with the innovation team in for Puma here, and I think it's just really interesting. There's something about inspiration. I mean, we can call it marketing, but like that sounds not as good as like the word like inspiration, right? Like showing people, hey, we're at the forefront of innovating and pushing boundaries and doing new things. And I mean, I think that was one of for me the best things about Fast R3. Not only is it crazy fast, but like people can get it and it works for everyone, most everyone. These smaller runs of shoes, it definitely is a big question mark of like, what's the real impact on the world? Is it
Mm-hmm.
Instagram? Is it eyeballs? Okay, there's a marketing value to that, right? Like every brand has a big marketing budget. That's fine. And if that's what you're doing, that's one thing. I mean, I will just speak for me and my personal experience and my team, and we use the projects that we do, Fast RB, for instance, things like that, as a way to I mean, there in every one of our lives we have boundaries, right? We have things set in that it's like you have to do this thing, but you have to do it in this box. And there's
Mm-hmm.
almost always a box, and the question is, can I'm losing my analogy. I'm like, can you bend a corner on the box, or how can you do it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm biking to work quite a bit right now, and it was 15 and a half miles with some dirt and farmers road, and I've got my 15 and a half down to like 12.8 miles by trimming little pieces here and
Yeah.
there. And my commute went from an hour five to 50 minutes. Yet last night was my new best time. So there's like these little pieces of ways that we can find to play, but just I think to be more efficient and in the unsaid, which I think is somehow true, if you are doing crazy and advanced and innovative things and pushing boundaries, do you apply those things directly to, let's call it the core line or whatever? Some of them, right? Like if you have the best absolute foams, you at least know how to do that, and you maybe don't use exactly that, but you could, or some of those other learnings. So I think that there is something valuable to pushing boundaries in the way that could potentially take down, but also that it's like then you have this body of knowledge, right? Like you've researched things, you know how to do things, and then you could potentially apply those learnings to many
Mm-hmm.
other areas.
Well, I mean, in terms of the direction that shoe marketing has gone over the last few years, it's like it's clear that it's going to be something where we're highlighting our performance line. And then maybe in the case of like Adidas, they don't bring that shoe to market, but they bring pieces of it to market in different shoes that they can say, hey, this was the shoe that broke 6 hours in the 100K, or this was the shoe that broke the world record in the marathon, or something like that. And that's where they get some value out of that. But as far as it goes from that angle of let's take our performance line and showcase this to get our brand awareness out, I can't think of a I mean, I'd be curious what like to the degree that you can share, like what the marketing team at Puma was thought of after the Boston Fast Star launch, because I thought that was perfect. Because one, you picked a big race that everyone's watching, Boston. Two, you brought a new shoe to market early enough so people could put it on their foot at the expo and decide to race in it in some cases. I don't know how many runners ended up wearing it at Boston, but it was not an inconsequential number.
Yeah.
Um, and it was legal. So like the shoe is like, so like there's really not a lot of complaining that can be done. And then on top of it, it lived up to its hype. Like it didn't come back like, oh, we tested this in the lab now, third party, and it's like 2%. So it turns out like it wasn't faster than like, any of the better options out there. It actually exceeded that. So it's like, I can't imagine like after the fact, you guys had a whole lot of like, oh man, I wish we would have done this differently from that buildup.
No, and I would, I've been with a lot of companies in my 20 years and maybe 9 brands and retailers, right? Like I've worked with a lot of big companies, a lot of teams. It was simply one of the best executed products and processes across the entire board, from briefing the innovation team saying, hey, like, can we find a better foam? Them working with some sports scientists, like what's the latest cutting edge in the way that we're designing shoes, getting a final. You want to know one of the fun facts, Zach? The number of prototypes that we did for Fast R3 was basically one. Like
Really?
we
Wow.
did such a certain process that almost spit out the exact right answer at the beginning. I mean, there was so much work that had gone into it, but when we actually
Mhm.
finally got a shoe, like, yeah, Fast R2, there were like 3 or 4, and it was like, oh, are we doing this, or where are we putting like all the questions? There weren't very many questions. Innovation executed an awesome shoe. We knew it was good. We were telling the marketing team. They were thinking, okay, we don't have, teams in Africa like some brands and whatever, and, and there's, whatever, all that stuff. So it's like, if we're not going to do, Berlin Marathon record, like some brands have done with women and stuff, it's like, how do we not just prove it on maybe one person, but how do we bring this to a lot of people? And I mean, fun fact, that shoe was originally planned to launch like December, like maybe even a couple months from now. And then we're like, no, it's good. We need it in like September. And we pushed it forward a couple months. And then we were like, no, we really want to hit the spring marathon season if we could. And we pushed it all the way forward to April. And I mean, again, Luke and the marketing team, like, Project 3 was awesome. Having 100 runners in Boston and 100 in London, and having them have access to the Puma family, right? So we got to know them a little bit. They got coaching, they got nutritional advice, they got to meet some of our elites and really get the full experience. And it was actually just originally called Project 3. Like, it wasn't like, oh, we're launching this new shoe, blah, blah, blah. It was like, hey, who wants to be a part of Puma fam? Who wants to get a little bit of, involvement with us as a brand? Obviously we all knew it, but they didn't immediately. But then they all got a Fast R3 at the beginning of the program to practice in and do the acclimation, which is, maybe the biggest theme of what we've been talking about. But then also that fresh pair on race day. And yeah, I mean, the PRs speak for themselves. I think it was like 70 out of the 180 people set a new PR, which, holy cow. And most of them were by over 3 minutes. And, I don't know the number of hours and time that we saved, but it was really, I think, a perfect storm of like briefing, execution on product, go to market, marketing, and then obviously the sales of the shoe have been really, really strong when it's in stock, because it just sells out like crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's gotta be the hardest thing to predict, is like how many units should we produce, because like, yeah, you don't know how, if it ends up as successful as it was, you could almost have made an unlimited number and they'd just be flying off the shelves.
I mean, you can, but there's so many considerations with there. When you're using more premium materials, the lead times are longer.
Mhm.
Factory capacity is definitely something that the average consumer doesn't think about. They think, well, if we wanted to make 10 million Fast R3s, of course you can do it, but yeah, things aren't quite as easy always. So no, we feel really, really good about it. I mean, it's we still have, as the plates go tumbling, like Deviate Elite 3 is still such a winner for so many people, and it works and it's smooth. It is end up for my 100-mile dropout, but that's what I ended up choosing as well because the
Hmm.
geometry is good, the balance is like all the good things. So I think I generally still point most people towards Deviate Elite. I think it's well, I've heard from run groups all around Europe and the US. A lot of people say it's basically the perfect shoe. Some are
Yeah, I
maybe
like that one.
luckier, some are faster, some are this or that. But just like great bounce, great roll, great everything. So I think most people would still benefit from something like that, and if they haven't tried a super shoe, but certainly Fast R3 is different. I'm not gonna say it's not. So.
Is there, do you have in-house, to the degree you can share, like percentage efficiency variance between the Deviate Nitro 3 and the Fast R?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We haven't been focused on that as much because we really wanted to prove Fast R3 against the competition.
Hmm.
Um, it is a little bit of it's a great question because if Fast R3 is so extreme and so fast, our other super shoe is therefore not going to stack up, like almost by definition. But it's not about that, right? The same way that Nike has Alpha Fly and Vaporfly, and they're doing a little bit different things for different consumers. I think our two shoes both have like a key target demographic that I don't want to say that it doesn't cross over, but for me, it's exactly what you said. It's like for a marathon and less, I'm doing Fast R3, but for anything longer or when I need
Hmm.
more stability, which by the way, a lot of people that's important to them, right? Like I think a lot of the competition in the marketplace could maybe make faster shoes, but they're actually focused on marathon shoes for comfort,
Hmm.
which is great. A lot of people and consumers really want that. And so there's something to be said for that. And I mean, like I said, if I were to pick up and do a 16-week marathon training program, like could I go after a PR? I really don't know, but I don't know if it would be worth it compared to when I was younger, right? And so as people, everybody's at a different spot in their life, different priorities. And so if healthy running or maybe stability is more important, you got to have
Hmm.
shoes for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you can't just have premium options on the line.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, 300, 500 euros. That's all we
Right.
pay for
Yeah.
shoes anymore, right? Like people be like, what is wrong? Like, that doesn't make sense. So
It's like those memes where there'll be someone like walking through the grocery store in a pair of Alpha Flies and it's
it's there. It's there all day long. I haven't seen many fast stars at the grocery store yet, but
not
maybe
yet. Yeah.
maybe that's
I'm gonna
coming.
change that. I'm gonna start wearing mine around in the grocery store.
Oh my gosh,
Get
love
some
it.
pics. Yeah, no. Um, the one other thing I was gonna ask you about too, with respect to just like the innovation stuff, is it seemed like kind of when the premium phones were coming out, like the standard was just like PIBA was kind of this like gold standard where that's what was like, to the degree where people are looking for that, where it's like if it has that, then I'm heading in the right direction. If not, I might not even consider as like a way to like almost select or narrow the selection process down.
Yeah.
But then like as the foam, I mean, it's interesting. I think maybe once World Athletics came with the regulations of like 40 millimeter stack, a single plate, it gave a little bit more direction as to now the brands had like something they had to operate within, and that allowed for like more exploration outside of PIBA because now it's like they're not trying to also do a bunch of stuff outside of where the regulations were set at. Um, what do you have any insight in terms of just like kind of what was kind of the idea behind, okay, we're going to take some other types of midsole foam and make something that can actually produce similar or greater efficiency to some of those earlier PIBA models?
Yeah, I mean, the first brand 2016, pardon me, that did the first super shoe, I haven't seen or heard too much of how they actually came to their conclusion. Like they certainly told the story that they went to the Kenyans and said, hey, you've been racing a marathon in a 4-ounce shoe. We're gonna make a 1-ounce shoe. And it was like, wait, what? Like, yeah, and it was not only we're gonna make a lighter shoe, but it was our theme. It was, and you need to adapt to basically running a marathon barefoot because
Mhm.
they're running it, even though research would say no, there's a benefit to cushioning. Like you can run more efficient in a shoe with cushion than you can purely barefoot. But anyway, that was the initial thing, and the athletes were like, I don't know, man, that's gonna hurt. Like I'm already hurting, and this is gonna hurt
Right.
even more. And I've never really heard from them a clear story of when they went from, hey, basically like a no shoe to like, oh, let's overshoe. I'll speculate for 1 second. It's potential when they said, hey, we're going to go from a 4 ounce shoe to a 1 ounce shoe, but we don't want to put nothing under your feet, that they could have said, hey, let's actually find the least dense foam possible. Like if I were in Oregon and that were like my project, that's how I would do is say, oh, well, we want to have, I mean, I'm going to hold up a Mag Max. This is 300 grams, but we want this to weigh 100 grams and be the
Hmm.
same thing. So you need something that's way, way less dense. I don't know if that's how they did it. And I will say from, when they came out with that groundbreaking thing, like, I mean, you and I were at the same brand at the time. I pitched them. I said, hey, I don't know what this stuff is. We need to go get this right now. They didn't do it. I mean, we came out with Ultra Ego, which was pretty good. It had a little bit more, rubberized compounds in it, but certainly wasn't in that P-Bax vein. And even when
Hmm.
I came to Puma and we started Nitro, that was, I think, part of the story was first like what's best in class in the industry for everyday and for race day. And yes, P-Bax is Kleenex, right? Like tissues, the name brand is Kleenex. P-Ba is polyether block amide, whatever. And then P-Bax with the X is Arkema's branded version. And they've done a great way of that, the same way Vibram has branded
Hmm.
outsoles, right? Like they've done a really, really good job with their marketing and also with product development. But for me at Puma, step one was like, hey, what's best in class? Everybody's doing this. Okay, you got to get to there first. And then specifically working with Ramon on the innovation team and sitting here is like, okay, so historically it used to be foams were PU, and then there was EVA, and then Boost ETPU, and then there were some of these TPEEs, and also the PBA at some point. And it was like, well, wait, if we've actually used so many different plastics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I just named, that was part of the brief, and the question was, well, what's number 6? What's the next thing that's beyond all of the other things? And I mean, for me and my team, like that's, I would say, part of the process is of trying to stay advanced. But it's, Zach, I gotta tell you, it's so many people. It's so many people working together in teams and knowledge. Because even if a lot of brands are talking about aliphatic TPU, and we're using some
Hmm.
aliphatic. There's still at least 100. I'm not a material. There's at least 100 variations of aliphatic TPU. Maybe the scientists sit next to me would say 2 or 300. I don't know. Like there's so much, and then we talk about P-backs, or we talk about like this is just a plastic pellet, right?
Yeah.
That's not the formula. That's like saying if you want to run a marathon, go for a run. Like, well, wait. So there's tempo, there's long runs, there's speed, there's lactate threshold, there's all these things, and it's the same with foam. You start with a raw material. There's processing time, there's temperature, there's heat, there's cooling, there's off gassing, there's all these different parts to it that I think go into that final formula. So I'll pass it back to you, and you can kind of redirect me back to the towards
Yeah.
the question. But there's so much that goes into that process.
Just a quick reminder that Currents is a product I use pre workout and during events to help with blood flow, recovery, and fat oxidation. Check out currentsusa.com. That's CURRANZUSA.com to see the 40 plus studies they have and use promo code BITTER20DEAL for 20% off your first purchase. Full description of how I use Currents at the end of the episode. Yeah, I guess like maybe to summarize, like somewhere along the way when Puma was deciding we need to make a shoe that is gonna exceed market expectations as they currently stand, they saw that path forward with ATPU versus like a PIBA. So um, I mean, that I think is just interesting in and of itself that like we have, because or maybe the follow up question is more to the degree of just like we have, and I think you've sort of answered this to some degree. It's like my thought was like once we put these parameters in a 40 millimeter stack, single
Mm,
plate, it's going to be a race within that category or within those parameters, but then it limits how much can be done.
right.
Like, I guess if there were, it'd be really cool if we had a scale of like, we have like a limitless number of potential within these parameters still in terms of finding more performance, or we're like really close to the end where at a certain point we're just going to hit like a roadblock where within these parameters we just really can't get any faster?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can do on the product development side in terms of just building shoes. I My personal opinion is the World Athletic rules were put in place to level the playing field and ground where, Puma, we have an innovation department. Other brands do not have that, right? So dedication of resources and all that stuff. I mean, that's what I think those rules were initially put in place. That said, like, we're still innovating. Other brands are innovating. I mean, I think that's where one of the other things where like the patents come in really, really strong. Like there's so many carbon fiber plate patents. So I'm not sure what the root of the question is. If it's like, oh, is everybody going to start copying or coming out with the same shoe? I mean, you every brand has to execute, right? Like we still have to execute the supply chain and the supply and the demand and the design and the marketing and like all of those pieces have to go together. I mean, one good example from my memory is like Reebok, right? Like Reebok in 2018 was the second company to use P-backs to my memory, and
Hmm.
I knew some people there, and I was like, oh wait, this is like the best foam in the industry, and they didn't have the rest of the pieces put together
Mm,
in the
yeah.
same way, right? So I think that's where it all has to come together. And that's no shade on them. I actually haven't followed much of what they've been doing recently, but I'm just saying that they were way ahead of 9 out of the top 10 running brands, right? But
Hmm.
you have to do all the pieces to get it to the finish line.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. You have to, yeah, you got to have the team in place to actually explore like the edges of the regulations in order to really actually bring something to market that's going to do what we want, what you want it to do from that stand. Because it is funny because like people get like pretty up, I don't, maybe not upset, but they wonder like, why hasn't Nike come out with something that kind of really advances their original model to a larger degree? I think the expectation maybe was that that was going to be the case, and they sort of like, I mean, they came out of the gates hot, obviously, but then from there, it basically kind of just like plateaued. And then the other brands have now kind of caught up. And in Puma's case, to with at least some of the research we have suggests they've surpassed it in certain cases, anyway. Um, but yeah, it is interesting because you'd think Nike's probably sitting in their development rooms and thinking about, okay, what are we doing next? But yeah, it's fun to speculate, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't work there. I don't know all those answers either. I also wonder some of those questions. And I mean, they hit such a home run with both shoes. Like the first
Mhm.
Vaporfly was like best shoe in the industry by far, and even the Alpha Fly was also really, really good. And to your point, yeah, at some point you're seeing people in those shoes at the grocery store. They're selling a lot of that shoe, right? They're
Yeah.
selling
So
a lot.
where's the drive, I guess, to make something else at that point?
Yeah, and I don't know what's next for them. And I mean, that was one of the funny things when we're putting out Fast R3. We're like, oh, what's the best shoes from the industry? But we tried we tested against Adios Evo 1, but the 2 came out just a couple weeks later, right? And it's like, okay, wait, they changed the foam, they changed the geometry, they changed like where does that stack up? And that's where it's an ongoing like thing, but you don't know what's coming next and when. And I will say for me, that's part of what I love about my job, being a product line manager and working on shoes and briefing a shoe or a foam or a different element and going, okay, this is what's the best now. But I wake up every day and there's new YouTube videos to watch
Right.
and new Instagram posts and new things, and it's like, man, people everywhere are working hard, and it still is those two things I said. Step one is be best in class, equal to what else is out there. In step two is find your ways to elevate and do something different, and that's a little bit, I guess, my life philosophy or mantra right now.
Mhm.
But there's so much going on, and I will say too, like Connor, Damien, the guys that are on my team, they are also hawks on that stuff. And so anything that goes on, like I've always known my stuff about shoes. When you've got people around you that are even also hawkish on it, it's like, oh, okay, okay. It challenges you to have good teammates.
Absolutely. No, that's interesting. Yeah. I did have one other kind of interesting thing that I would just love to hear your thought on too that's caught me off guard a little bit was when we got the World Athletic regulations, my thought was like, well, there's really no reason to make a shoe that's like 50 millimeter stack height or that deviates from that regulation. And then, like, we've got multiple brands now making shoes that they're technically illegal,
Yeah.
but they found a spot in the market for them because from my perception, uh, you have the shoe like, you have the limitations where you kinda have this little bit of a competing interest between performance and stabilization. But when you take the rules off the board, now you can make a shoe that performs potentially similar, but can be maybe a little bit heavier, a little more stable.
Yeah.
And when someone's just looking about doing their normal training and they want to kind of get used to being in that sort of a product or get used to that foam, or maybe like one of the guys at Brady Homer who helps review shoes with me, he's had a bunch of injuries before the premium foams, and now he's at least partly convinced that like these foams have actually helped him stay healthy. So for him, it's like a brand comes out with a 46 millimeter stack height shoe that's got some stability to it, and he can do some training miles in that thing and stay
Yeah.
healthy. That's awesome for him. So it's like it's just it's funny to me to think like that type of a product has got a big enough market demand that that brands, not just one brand but multiple brands, are doing that.
Well, I think this is something we've clearly seen in the last maybe 10 years, but definitely 5 years where, um, and it's not just that foams are getting softer and lighter, so you can have the same weight shoe with more cushion. Um, but I really, and I don't know if I know the answer why. I think my best speculation as to the why is more cushioning just feels a little bit better. And we've given every shoe a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more to where the old like 32 millimeter then was like, no, 36 is the new normal. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh no, 40 is the new normal. And, now Mag Max is 46. And I actually, speaking of my own personal, I actually have tried to stop running in some of those crazy overly max shoes because as I said earlier, like I'm a little bit more of a naturalist and I have a lot of cushioning in my foot, so I don't personally need like the shoe to do a lot of cushioning, right? Somebody with like a really rigid foot and a rigid arch, I would say, hey, you could benefit maybe from more cushioning. But my point is, if 40 is the new 36 or everybody's adapting to more and more cushioning, I don't know what the answer is other than like it feels normal. And so that's where the center and the meat of the market is. And as far as the rules go, I, me personally, I think I am glad that there's that 40 millimeter cap,
Mhm.
because otherwise I think it would get crazy. And I'm not, I mean, saying our shoe or anybody else's shoe is whatever, but like there would be some really potentially weird things out there, and maybe that would be good or maybe it would just be weird. I don't know. Like the one that actually gets me, Zach, is the track, because I think the track spikes are all still limited at 20 millimeters.
Is it
And that,
25 or something like that? Yeah.
so it used to be 25, it's soon going to be
Oh,
20.
is it? Okay.
I don't
Interesting.
know exactly what date that goes into effect. But they didn't just want to go all the way down, so they did 25 for a little bit and then at some point it will be 20. And I a little bit struggle to understand that. I also thought, yeah, 25 or even 30. Like it's not crazy when there's 40, to the point where I'm like, the African that girl that tried to run the 1 mile under 4 minutes. I'm like, if she's cheating and using pacers and doing all these things, I'm like, shouldn't she be in an alpha fly? Like, would that be more
Right, yeah.
efficient than her spike? I don't know the answer. But I think at the end of the day, their point is wanting to have fair competition, which I support.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the Faith Kipyegon sub
Yeah.
4 attempt was interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if you're gonna break the rules anyway, then I guess maybe it kinda gets into the conversation we were talking about before with the chasing 100 thing. It's like they're gonna break rules to try to show, but then at what point do people start to kinda, like, lose interest because it becomes too uncomparable to anything they would actually see in real life?
I
But
mean,
yeah,
you can,
I would think you've normalized alpha flies to a large degree now, so I don't think people would have been, like, too upset if she had been wearing those.
yeah. And I mean, you can get in a taxi and somebody will say, oh, yeah, I know the guy that broke 2 hours for the marathon. And it's like, well, okay, he didn't do it like legally, like it doesn't
Right.
count. But in the social atmosphere, like everybody says, no human is limited, right? And that's like
Mhm.
in our, this guy did it. It's like, well, okay, he had extra wind help and we can grade how much, but like technically it was against the rule. So I
Hmm.
sometimes wonder myself, I'm like, what's the point? Like, Spira. Do you remember Spira, the shoe with the springs in it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They had guys running like 24 or 25-minute 10Ks because I think they were down in
Yeah,
Mexico, and it was a 10K where it lost like 3 or 5,000 feet.
yeah.
It's like what? Like what's the point? Like okay,
Right.
great. And that's just me personally. I'm like maybe I'm just more of a naturalist where I'm like no, I want like the real thing. What I do want though, and I don't know if you have this, but I do want like all my old PRs. I want to know what the adjustments
Right.
are
We
for
need we need conversion
superstars.
chart, a reliable conversion chart.
We need it. We need it. The closest I've seen is it can be up to I think one second a lap on the track or something like
Hmm.
that. So I'm gonna take my 1500 from 358 down to 354, and no, it
It's a nice
doesn't
little
matter.
bump.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Kara and Des? Nobody asked us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They're a really funny duo that they're just like, gosh darn it, like 15 years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm like that too. So
yeah. Yeah, it's a fun speculation. We'll have to let the kids solve those problems for us though, since they get all the cool toys.
well, I think one of the best things that's gonna come out of this talk is I was completely on the fence about fall 50, even though I
Now
had
you're doing it.
no, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And I don't know if I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, so steady state is 144 heart rate, or if I'm just gonna be like Zach, I'm gonna go put down 182 and see how long I can hold max.
You can
No,
always just throw like human physiology to the wind and just decide to see what happens. You never know.
that's one of the sad things about 100 milers, I will say, is
Hmm.
it's not as much fun. There isn't as much of a variable of like what am I going to get? And sometimes it can be for me a little bit even demotivating if you're like wanting a PR and like real quick, like within a couple hours you can be like I'm not getting a PR.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it becomes a little bit of a different thing, but
It's like, why am I out here? Yeah.
yeah, and that's what I really liked about your and Alyssa's talk. And I would tell everybody to go back and listen to it when you were chasing that 100-mile world record. And, and you were like so sick of doing 30 miles every day around the track. And I saw it.
Yeah.
I saw like 30. I'm like, Zach, do you go clockwise or counterclockwise today? And then you went and did San Diego 100, something just totally different, kind of cleared
Hmm.
your mind. And then you ended up getting that world record. Not when you were like aiming and going. You were just like, you were fresh and you were clear and you did it,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It kind of shows, um, just like, yeah, you kind of need a cognitive break, I think, from some stuff every once in a while, and that kind of resets the motivation to some degree. And I mean, to some, you could also maybe argue that doing San Diego 100 was just good in terms of like there's a lot of strength development running up a Mount Ord, which is almost
Be
you
be
do two.
more be more inspirational about it. Don't make it so you gave the mental break. You're like,
It flipped
oh,
something in my head. Yeah.
yeah, you're like the VO2 max. Well, no, Zach. I mean, honestly, that's one of the hardest things for me is like still wishing I could like chase really big times in between the body not being able to handle it and other things that are also important. It's like that's why I'm like, you know what? Like I'm happy to just go explore the world, right? Like running's
Hmm.
great. You can go anywhere. You can really get to know a city when you're traveling or anywhere and just get to do a little bit more. But no, yeah, I will definitely be requesting your coaching services if states or if UTMB or any of these things
There you
happen.
go.
And maybe
That's cool.
maybe I'll be a little bit more analytical about it.
We'll make sure
Let's
you don't end up like on the side of Forest Hill dropping out. That's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely thought about David Roach when I was at mile 35 and looking at my baby, and I was like, oh gosh, let's go get a pizza. But that's okay too, right? Like priorities, and I'm so happy
Absolutely.
to have my little girl LMA. So
No doubt. Well, Todd, it's been awesome chatting about a whole bunch of different stuff, I guess. But yeah, before I let you go, is there anywhere people can find you that you want them to know about?
I mean, I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. It's actually interesting. Like when we started Nitro 2021, I was posting everything, every win, everything that happened. Now we have such a strong team that does so many good things, and also for me, just like shifting a little bit more towards balance, right? Like balancing running and family and work and keeping all of those things in mix. So no, I've done a lot of my best things. So if you want to do something, go like my Michigan post from when I set my FKT, and it was my 100th marathon. And I'm not saying I'll never do that again, but sometimes it's good to also look back and just be happy. I mean, when I was prepping for Berlin, I went and looked at my 100-mile PR, and I looked at the splits, and I was like, I ran 12-minute miles all night long. And I actually just, instead of being like, I'm going to go crush it, I was like, I have respect for what I've done in the past a little
Yeah,
bit, you know? So it's a
yeah.
good perspective.
It's okay to be proud of your accomplishments for sure. So awesome. Well,
Absolutely.
I'll link that stuff to the show notes for people who want to kind of check out what you're up to. But yeah, it's been awesome chatting, Todd, and we're looking forward to seeing how things go at the Fall 50.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing too. It's good to, you have so many good guests, and it's good to dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics. So thanks for letting me be a part of your show.
Absolutely. Thanks for sticking around and listening to how I use the show sponsors. Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte supplement. Based on my electrolyte loss rate of 614 milligrams per liter, I begin my day with half a packet of one of their hot beverage flavors with my morning coffee. I rotate through all of them, but my favorite at the moment is the chocolate mint. Later in the day, I have been having either a packet of their watermelon flavor or a can of Element Sparkling, which is their carbonated electrolyte drink. I usually have the black cherry lime or watermelon flavor for those. If you are curious about how to dial in your own fluid and electrolyte setup, check out episode 300 of this podcast, where I dive into some of the things you can do at home to gauge how much fluid and electrolytes you may need. A free sample pack with your first purchase can be found at drinklmnt.com/HPO. Delta G ketones is the best researched exogenous ketone supplement on the market. The research on exogenous ketones is constantly evolving. Delta G is responsible for much of it, hosting 50 plus published studies and 20 plus ongoing studies, and have received DARPA grants designed for special forces. Delta G uses ketone esters, which is unmatched in raising blood ketone levels when matched per gram. The best use case, as the evidence currently stands, is as a post-workout supplement for better recovery and or during longer, lower intensity sessions to help with mental focus. For this reason, I will have a bottle of Delta G Performance, that's the little blue bottle, after my biggest workouts for the week and during long run training sessions once I have been out running for about 45 to 60 minutes. Head over to deltagketones.com and enter BITTER20 for 20% off your next purchase. Currents, which is spelled Curranz, is a pre-workout supplement that I started using this year based on the mounting evidence that has started pointing towards them as being a potential endurance workout supplement that can help move the needle on things like recovery, blood flow, fat oxidation rate, reduce muscle damage, etc. They have 40 plus studies on their website if you want to check those out. The way I use this product is when I wake up in the morning, I usually have a cup of coffee and some electrolytes and just start my day getting hydrated. And while I'm doing that, I'll have a couple capsules of Currents along with that. And then I get out for my first workout. If I'm doing something a little bit longer, like a really long ultra-specific long run or an ultramarathon race or something like that, where I'm going to be out there for multiple hours, I'll usually have another capsule or two every 4 hours while out there doing that. So I'm excited to see what this can possibly do for some of the races I got coming up this year. If you want to check them out and some of the research that they have, head over to currentsusa.com. That's CURRANZUSA.com. And don't forget to plug in the promo code BITTER20DEAL, which will get you 20% off your first purchase. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.